Not our problem, Rachel. You're an adult. My mother said it so evenly that for a moment I thought I had misheard her. I was standing in the hospital parking lot, wearing borrowed scrubs and smoke that still clung to my hair despite the cold air. The fire alarm in my building had gone off at 2:14 that morning. By 2:31, I was standing across the street with 32 other tenants, watching flames move through the third floor of the apartment building I had lived in for 7 years. By 4 a.m., I had exactly what I'd left with. My phone, my purse, my car keys. Everything else belonged to an insurance company and a fire investigator now. I only need somewhere for a few days, I said, until I know what the next step is. There was a pause on the line. Not a thoughtful pause, an inconvenient one. Rachel, your father and I aren't in a position to take on additional responsibility right now. I looked across the parking lot toward the emergency entrance. Additional responsibility? Caleb and Monica are already staying here while they get back on their feet. That surprised me, less than it probably should have. My older brother was 39 years old. Getting back on his feet had become something of a family tradition. I understand, I said. My mother exhaled softly, relieved the conversation wasn't becoming difficult. The call ended politely, almost professionally. I thanked my mother for her honesty and hung up after exactly 92 seconds. The strange thing was that I wasn't angry when I hung up. Not immediately. Mostly, I felt tired in a familiar way. My brother Caleb had always been the emergency in the room. When we were children, it was because he struggled in school and I didn't. When we were older, it was because his jobs never lasted quite as long as everyone expected them to. There was always a reason, usually a reasonable one. Reasonable things accumulate. By 39, Caleb had received help with 3 different houses, a down payment once, temporary rent assistance another time, then help after a move that was supposed to create a fresh start somewhere else. My parents called it giving him stability. I believed them. I was 22 when I started working nights while finishing school during the day. Pediatric respiratory therapy paid better after midnight, and tuition bills don't care when you're tired. By graduation, I carried $48,600 in student loans and a habit of solving my own problems before they became anyone else's. My parents were proud of me. That was the language they used. Proud, independent, responsible, useful words, useful children. I don't remember ever asking why independence in one child became evidence that they needed less love than dependence in another. At some point, family stories harden into family rules. Caleb needed help. Rachel was fine. The remarkable thing is how long 2 sentences can explain an entire household. 3 years earlier, my father had called me about a missed mortgage payment. The family waiting room on the 4th floor was designed for bad news, not long-term living. The chairs reclined just enough to suggest sleep without ever allowing it. The lights dimmed after midnight, but never completely. Someone was always walking the hallway outside. A hospital doesn't really believe in silence. After my shift ended, I folded my coat into a pillow and slept there anyway. One night became 2, then 4. By the second morning, Elena Vasquez had noticed I was wearing the same sweatshirt over different scrubs. By the third, she had quietly appeared with 2 borrowed uniforms folded in a paper bag. No speeches, she said when I tried to thank her. Understood. Wendy Kim figured it out shortly after that. Hospital people become experts at recognizing the difference between tired and displaced. Neither woman asked questions I didn't want to answer. Neither offered advice. They simply made room. Chief Aaron Doyle found me near the cafeteria on the 4th afternoon. He introduced himself, handed me his card, and explained that the investigation was moving slowly. The smoke damage alone is extensive, he said. Realistically, you're looking at close to 11 months before that building is ready for occupancy again. 11 months. The number landed differently than I expected. Not frightening. Clarifying. For the first time since the fire alarm at 2:14 a.m., I stopped treating my situation like a long weekend inconvenience. That evening, I sat alone in the waiting room and realized something uncomfortable. Strangers had offered me uniforms, meals, coffee, and a place to rest. Family had offered me a principal. On the 4th night, my father finally called. My father's voice carried the careful tone people use when they already know the answer to the question they're about to ask. How are you holding up? I'm all right. A pause, then another. Listen, he said. Are you still able to help us with this month's payment? Not the apartment, not the fire, not where I was sleeping. The mortgage. For a moment I thought I had misunderstood him. The mortgage. Just until things settled down a little. Things. I looked across the waiting room toward the vending machines humming against the wall. My apartment had burned down 6 days earlier. I still owned exactly one pair of shoes. No, I said. The word surprised both of us. My father went quiet. I see. It wasn't anger in his voice, more confusion, as if a machine that had always accepted coins had suddenly started returning them. After we hung up, I opened the folder on my laptop that I hadn't touched in years, mostly because I had never needed to. Bank confirmations, transfer receipts, email chains. 11 years of helping quietly enough that it eventually disappeared into the background. I started counting. The first transfer had been $400 for a car repair. Caleb couldn't afford. The largest had been $12,000. Mortgage assistance, insurance deductibles, medical bills, temporary emergencies with permanent memories. By midnight, I had gone through 73 separate transfers. The spreadsheet totaled itself automatically. Some numbers arrive with emotion attached to them. This one arrived with silence. The final number on the spreadsheet was $186,430. The fundraiser had been Elena's idea. I found out about it the same way I found out about most acts of kindness at the hospital, after they had already started. By the following Friday, 46 members of the staff had contributed food, raffle items, or money. Someone donated gift cards. Someone else arranged a silent auction. One of the surgeons brought homemade cookies that disappeared in 11 minutes. The room felt warmer than I expected. Not because of the money, because of the effort. By the end of the evening, the fundraiser had collected $22,800. Enough to replace furniture. Enough to start over. My parents arrived halfway through. My mother hugged me tightly in front of people she knew professionally through community events and local charities. We're just so grateful Rachel is safe, she told a small group nearby. Family takes care of family. That's what matters in times like this. I said nothing. Not because I agreed. Because correction and dignity are not always the same thing. A few minutes later, Chief Aaron Doyle stepped up to thank everyone for supporting fire victims in the community. He spoke for less than 2 minutes. Near the end, he glanced in my direction. I especially want to recognize Rachel, he said. Most people don't realize she worked full shifts at the hospital while sleeping in our family waiting room for 4 nights after the fire. The room became very quiet. Not dramatic quiet. Thinking quiet. My mother looked at me, then at him, then back at me again. For the first time, my mother looked at me as though she had discovered I had been keeping records. My mother called the next morning, not to ask how I was doing, not to ask whether I had found a place to stay. "Did you enjoy that?" she asked. I stood in the hospital stairwell between floors 3 and 4, holding a coffee that had already gone cold. Enjoy what? Making us look bad. It was an interesting choice of words. Chief Doyle had stated exactly 3 facts. I had slept in the hospital waiting room for 4 nights. The hospital staff had organized the fundraiser. The community had helped me rebuild. Facts have a stubborn habit of sounding personal when they collide with a preferred version of events. I didn't tell him to say anything. I said, "People are talking, Rachel." I imagine they are. The conversation ended shortly after that. 3 days later, my father asked if we could meet. We sat at a diner halfway between his house and the hospital. For a while he stirred coffee he never drank. Then he asked quietly, "Was it true?" I knew what he meant. So, I brought the folder. 73 confirmations. 11 years. $186,430. Transfer after transfer. The largest single payment had been $12,000. 14 months of mortgage assistance. During one particularly difficult stretch. I slid the papers across the table without commentary. My father stopped longest at one line near the middle. Mortgage March, 2021. He looked up slowly. "You paid this?" "Yes." "For us?" I nodded. Across town, Caleb was learning that some of the stability he had always associated with our parents had arrived through his younger sister instead. My father stared longest at the transfer labelled simply, Mortgage March 2021. I signed the lease 13 months after the fire. Apartment 407. Fourth floor. Not large, but enough. By then, I had learned that enough, and plenty are often separated by expectation more than square footage. The first thing I carried inside was a box of kitchen supplies Elena had collected from co-workers. The second was a smoke-damaged key the restoration company had found buried beneath insulation and drywall from my old apartment. It no longer opened anything. I kept it anyway. My father started calling every Sunday afternoon around that time. The conversation stayed small at first. Weather, work, baseball scores. Neither of us cared very much about. Trust rarely returns all at once. It tends to arrive in installments. My mother remained polite when we spoke, though distance had replaced assumption. Oddly enough, the relationship felt more honest that way. Caleb called one evening to apologize. Not for receiving help, for never asking where it came from. That mattered more than he probably realized. The strangest part of the entire year was discovering that boundaries and resentment occupy very different rooms. I had expected one to bring the other. It didn't. What arrived, instead, was clarity. My parents had loved me. I believe that even now. But love and fairness are not identical things, and understanding the difference changed my life more than the fire ever did. On my first night in apartment 407, I opened the kitchen drawer beside the stove and placed the old key inside. Some doors survive only long enough to teach you which ones to stop knocking on.